Let's begin. So we're starting now to learn the basic halachot of Tevilat Kelim. Every time we buy new dishes, so we get to this question: and how do we do Tevilat Kelim? When do we do it? What about disposables? What about electric things like a toaster or dishes? So all of these questions, hopefully, we'll answer them to this evening. If we're a new couple, I think none of us here is a new couple, so we have this question quite often when we have many dishes. But even us, every now and then, we allow ourselves and we have something new, and the question is, what do we need to toivel? So we'll begin with first understanding where does this idea of toiveling the dishes, where does it come from, and I'll share the screen with you. We'll move, generally speaking, from the screen to seeing everyone, and if there's any questions, so just please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any questions. This shiur is the Nishmat Meir ben Ephraim. My grandfather passed away last week, and the topics we'll learn is the reason for Tevilat Kelim, what dishes need to be toivel, how do we toivel, a guest in a house, what does a guest do, and is it the food kosher? In other words, if we used a dish without toiveling it, is the food still kosher or no? So we start from the pasuk. It's a pasuk actually we saw also last week, and this pasuk, some of it talks about how to kasher dishes, and some of it talks about toiveling the dishes. The pasuk is talking about the context of the pasuk is when Bnei Israel are in the desert, just a few months before coming into the land of Israel, and they had a war against the nation of Midian. And it was a miraculous war. They won the war, and coming back from the war, they received a lot of gold and other things they took with them. They got with them. When they get back to the camp, so Hashem tells Moshe what to do with all those things that they took. And the pasuk says, I'll read it in English: gold and silver, copper, iron, tin, and lead. If we notice, all of those things are made out of metal or metal instruments. And the pasuk continues, any article that can withstand fire, so you should pass with the fire, and that talks about how to kasher it. That's what we talked about last week. And the pasuk says in Hebrew, ach b'mei nida itchata, except that they must be cleansed with water of lustration. So we see here an idea of taking the dishes and putting them into water, into a mikveh. And later on, I took a short clip, and I'll show it with you from the mikveh of Baron Hirsch. Will explain what a kosher mikveh is. So you can see the source of the pasuk. It's a mitzvah midoraita to take dishes, any food instruments that are made out of metal. As we can see, the pasuk is talking about things which are made out of metal, and toiveling them in a dish, in a mikveh. We're talking about instruments which are taken from a non-Jewish person. Okay, so anything which is taken from a non-Jewish person, it's dealt with food. We'll discuss soon exactly what for kind of food, and it's from metal. So the mitzvah from the Torah to dip it in a mikveh. The Shulchan Aruch, that's what it says. Okay. As we just explained now, and it says even if it's new, it's not a matter of kashering. Okay, it's not a question is the food kosher or no. It's the fact that some vessels came from a non-Jewish person to a Jewish person. Okay, so that it's not a matter of kasher. Even if we know it's kosher, even if it's new, we still need to toivel it. And the reason, as brought in the Be'er Tib and many other places, the reason is for the Tevilah is it's maybe like to show we're departing this vessel from the impurity of a non-Jewish worker, an idolship worker, to the holiness of Israel. Here, actually, we'll stop showing the screen. There's something I think quite interesting in this. A very interesting idea of taking dishes and saying, well, we bring it to the Jewish nation, we make it holy. It's an interesting idea with the Jewish nation. How do we see food? Do we see food or all of the materialistic world? Do we see it as something which it's materialistic, we prefer not to have it, we prefer to be like angels, or do we see all this physical world as something which is great and can be holy? And toiveling the dishes has this idea of take things which are made for food, take things which are made for as if the physical aspects of life, and make them holy. And that's an ideology of the nation of Israel. We see it from Abraham, from Yitzchak, especially in Yaakov Avinu, connecting, bringing, uplifting all of this materialistic world up to holiness. And this is what is very much resembled in toiveling dishes, in dipping or dumping dishes inside a mikveh. And the Shulchan Aruch mentions here two things. There's a mikveh or a ma'ayan. In the clip that I'll share with you later, we will see a bit of the definition of those things. Let's continue and go into the actual questions. What do we toivel? Okay, what dishes need to be toiveled? And here I took the main dishes we use. If you have any questions before we move to the next section, so please feel free to ask if there's any dishes which I missed. As we said, from the Torah, we need to toivel any dish that is used in the meal. And when we say in the meal, it's not even if we bring it to the table, any dish which is used for food, that can be eaten. Okay, I'll give you an example. A net of a barbecue. So when we finish barbecuing, the grill, with the grill, the food can be eaten. Okay, so therefore, grill of a barbecue needs to be toiveled. I think most people don't know that, but a grill of a barbecue needs to be toiveled since it's used for food that can be eaten at the end of the process. All the pots, okay, in the end of the process, it needs to be that the food can be eaten. An example for something which doesn't need to be toiveled is, according to most poskim, is a knife that is used for shechting an animal. And the reason for that is that when we shecht the animal, we can't eat it still. So the knife isn't considered a vessel which is used for the meal. And as we saw also, it's made out of metal. Our sages added also glass, and the main reason is that a glass, it's like metal in the aspect that you can melt it down. If it broke, you can melt it down and then reuse it. That will bring us later to plastic. Okay, but we know, from our sages, we need to toivel also things made out of glass. And here, we mentioned plastic. What about plastic? On one hand, plastic theoretically, and it actually happens also when we recycle, it can be metalled, it can be melted and reused. Therefore, some poskim, like the Minchat Yitzchak and others, say we should toivel it even with the bracha, since it's exactly like glass. Other poskim say, well, you don't need to toivel plastic. We have a rule in many other places. What our sages added, that's what we have. What they didn't mention, so we don't add it. We don't add zerot or mitzvot from our own. So Tzitz Eliezer and many other poskim hold you don't need to toivel plastic. Our sages mentioned glass, not other things. Some poskim say, well, since it's an argument, so let's toivel plastic without a bracha, without a blessing. However, I think the common custom is that we do not toivel plastic. And the reason is, since the argument is in a rabbinical halacha, so you go by the more lenient opinion. Why is it rabbinical? Everyone agrees that glass is from a rabbinical halacha, and plastic might be maybe like glass. So we have an argument in a rabbinical halacha, and the rule is sfek derabanan le'aker. When we have a question in a rabbinical halacha, we are lenient. That's about plastic. What about porcelain? Also here, I didn't write opinions, but we have a question. It's made out of some sand or something, which is coated with a very thin layer of glass. And here, what I saw most poskim write that since this layer of glass, the glaze, is so thin, it doesn't have any importance on its own. We do not toivel porcelain. However, if it's thicker, so some poskim will say to toivel without a blessing, without a bracha, Whenever I have a question with all those mugs and other things which I'm not sure about them, what about the glaze? I toivel it without a bracha or together with other instruments. That's Rabbi Salam. Disposables. This is a very common question, disposables. I'm sure none of you saw someone who toivels disposables. We don't toivel disposables. I think if we need to toivel disposables, we'll start using normal dishes. Go to the mikveh, take it. We don't toivel with disposables. Interestingly, when I built this class, so I saw that there are quite a few opinions that say that you should toivel disposables. And let's explain this argument. I'll stop sharing the screen a second. Let's explain the argument. There's a question about any disposables. Is it considered a kli? Is it considered a halichat kli vessel? A very common applying for this question is when we wash hands. Okay, we go for a trip and we want to wash hands before eating bread. Can we take a disposable cup and wash our hands? Okay. On one hand, this cup holds water. On the other hand, if it's not considered by the halacha like a kli, like a vessel, so maybe we can't wash the hands before eating bread. Okay, maybe we need a kli. So this question, if a disposable instrument is considered a kli, a vessel, or no, applies for quite a few places. And one of them is, do we need to toivel it with a blessing, with a bracha? If we say, well, it's not considered a kli, it's not a vessel at all, so obviously we don't need to toivel it with a bracha. If we say it is a kli, it is a vessel, so maybe we should toivel it. And there's maybe something in between. We say, look, obviously it's a kli, okay? It has importance. We might be able to use it for washing hands. You can see, we drink from it every day. So it's considered a vessel, it's considered a cup, it's considered a tray, on one hand. On the other hand, it is not important enough to say that it can become purer or impure. It's a vessel, but it's such a simple vessel, such a simple tray or whatever it is. All the laws of tum'ah and tahara, of purity and impurity, of cleanness and uncleanness, don't apply to disposables. Many poskim hold in this opinion, and therefore the common custom is not to toivel disposables. But here comes a question, and I'm sure some of you at least are asking this question. Okay, so something which is, I use it only once, it's not so important, I do not need to toivel it. What happens if I use it twice or 3 times? We try to be green or just try to save money, whatever our reasons are. And we sometimes use some of those aluminum trays a few times. Do we need to toivel it then? Because since we're using it a few times, maybe it has more importance. That's a question. And the answer also here is no, also that we don't need to toivel even if we use it a few times. And the reason is quite simple. Maybe 2 reasons. First, it's built. The fact I use it a few times doesn't make it to more important. It's a simple tray. It gets raked. It doesn't transfer heat as it's supposed as a regular tray. You look at it, you see it's nothing. It's just a bit of aluminium and put together. It's not something that it's really strong. It's something important. That's one reason. And another reason is that every time we use it, or after every time we use it, we have a debate. Should we use it again, or shouldn't we use it again? When we take our normal, regular Pyrex tray, okay, after we use it, we know we'll be using it also next week, and in 2 weeks, and maybe in a year or 2 years. When we use those aluminum trays, it's obvious that we use it maybe once, twice, 3 times, but then that's it. Sometimes we'll throw it out. It will get wrecked, it will get ruined. It's disposable. So that's why the common custom is not to toivel disposables, like aluminum trays, even if we use it a few times, even if we are green and we decide to recycle. That's about aluminum trays.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so suppose you have like a jar a glass jar from jelly or something, and you want to reuse it, and it's not a Jewish company that made it or anything else, do you have to tovel the jar, or can you reuse the jar?
That's a great question. But luckily, the poskim also discuss that about toveling the jars. So let's first begin before we reuse it. Okay, before we reuse it, let's discuss it only on the first time. I didn't bring it in here in the sources, but I thought, okay, maybe if we'll, one second, let's just let someone in. Okay, so I didn't bring it in the sources. So we have here a question: if we're using a jar, let's say we bought jam or jelly, and we're using it, do we need to, and we are reusing it, do we need to toivel it? Okay, that's the question we have. Maybe we should ask a question beforehand, which also we didn't. Should ask two questions beforehand and then get to this answer. Okay. First, what about the first time? Are we allowed? I bought a jar of jelly. Okay, and I'm using this jar of jelly. Okay, I'm using the jar of jelly. Can I use a jar of jelly? I mean, it has food inside. Can I use a jar of jelly? Okay, so that the answer will be, well, obviously we don't expect us to pour the jelly, toivel the jar, and then bring the jelly back into it again. Okay, it's like any other disposable container about the jar of jelly. What about containers that are for storing food? Okay, not for cooking, but for storing food. For example, we have containers that we store sugar. Okay, does a sugar container need to be toiveled? Okay, the sugar container need to be toiveled. And here the answer is yes. Okay, it's we store the food. The food is kept inside. It attaches the food, and the food can be used. The sugar inside can be used anytime. Okay, so it's like any other clay seuda. Okay, this is about any container which is supposed to be for storing things. So we need to toivel. And now we get to your question. Which we want to bring the opinions because of different opinions. I'll try to bring the exact opinions. Do we need to toivel a jar? So maybe I'll bring first the answer before explaining why. And the answer is no. We don't toivel jars even when you use it a few times. Okay. I'm trying to think in this. Yeah, we have here also here in the States. We have here jars which use a few times, and I've seen people who toivel them. But from what I see, people don't toivel jars. And the reason for it is actually probably maybe the same explanation as what we said about disposables. It's in the same category of disposables. They aren't supposed to be used for a long time. Okay, the factory who plants them doesn't create them in a way where they'll be comfortable to use for a long time. The lid usually is a bit different, and they're supposed to be things which are used as a disposable once, twice. It has the title of disposable on it, even if we use it a few times. Okay, it has a title of disposable. It's not planned. It wasn't created to be used as a regular thing. That's why quite a few poskim say. I'm trying to see just the names of them. The Igros Moshe said we can be Tzitz Eliezer said we can be maker in that. Since it's a category of disposables. Yet here quite a few poskim say you should toivel it. Okay, quite a few poskim say you should toivel it. My svara, the thought is that if you know you'll be using it once, twice, 3 times, you view it as something which is disposable, so it's like a disposable thing. If you use it completely for something which is used for always, so to toivel without a blessing. But again, for most houses, we use these jars once, twice. The lid sometimes doesn't close so well, so we change jars. We get a new jar, we change it. It has the title of disposables on it.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're going maybe to the most questionable topic is using electric things. What about electric things? Okay, do they need to be toiveled or no? I'll share. I don't think I have the sources in any case. Okay, so well, I don't need to won't share the thing. Let's just bring the thoughts. Let's start from why yes. Why should we toivel? Let's say we have a toaster. Now, some of the toasters you can just disconnect the heating plates or and toivel just the metal. That's fine. Okay. A toaster oven, just take the trays out and toivel the trays. Okay. We don't need to toivel all the oven. The oven doesn't touch the food. We need to toivel only what touches the food. So if it's easy to disconnect, obviously just disconnect and toivel what touches the food if it's from metal or glass. But what about a coffee machine, which has inside a pump and a metal container which holds the water? What about a kettle? What about a toaster or a sandwich maker? Okay, what about all those things? We toivel them or no? So there's an argument, and some hold, well, since it touches the food, it's like any other vessel, it needs to be toiveled. Some have other reasons that they say why not to toivel it. The first, and maybe one of the common explanations we hear, is any electric machine needs to be used when it's connected to the electricity, by definition. And when it's connected to the electricity, it becomes part of the ground, part of the land. And it's not a vessel anymore. It's something which is part of the land. And the same, we don't need to toivel anything which is part of the land. The laws of Tum'ah and Tahara do not apply to it. They're saying we also don't need to toivel any electric machine. Another opinion which is brought, it's not considered the clay seudah, a vessel which is like what the Torah is talking about. It's more of a machinery. But as I said, the most common explanation I heard was that since it can be used only when it's connected to the electricity, and connecting the toaster oven or toaster to the electricity makes it connected to the ground, so it's part of the ground, and the rules, the halachot of Tum'ah and Tahara do not apply on it. That's the opinions that say not to toivel. From my experience, and I've toiveled already quite a few things from electricity, and while I managed to ruin other frying pans by kashering them, I never ruined, Baruch Hashem, any electric vessel or whatever it is by toiveling it. Okay, I never ruined it. And the way I use it is very simple. First, you toivel only simple things. Okay, things which have only a heating element, and that's it. I don't toivel things which LEDs and all sorts of other screens and things which are more complicated. I toivel only things which are simple. A kettle is a very simple idea. You dip it in the water, take it out, and here's the most important part. Let it dry at least for a day. At least for a day. I let it dry sometimes for 2 days, depending on the weather. Let it dry at least for a day. And all those things are usually built to stand water. Okay, a kettle has water around it. In the kitchen, it always gets a bit wet. Water splashes in, out. And when you let it dry, and that's very important, let it dry well. I never found any problem with it. And also my friends and other rabbis said they never found problems in toiveling dishes like that. There are other ways to solve it. Rabbi Feinstein said to block the places of electricity, to take it apart and rebuild it again, to give it as a present to a non-Jew. And I think for simple things, it's just simple to toivel it, and that's it. And for more complicated things like a coffee machine with a screen, so that rely on the poskim and the rabbis that say that you don't need to toivel it. So that's about electricity dishes. Okay, so that's we discussed, I think, the main kind of dishes of what do we need to toivel. Before we move on, if there's any questions about this section, so great, and if not, we can move on.
Yeah, I have one more question, and it's about stoneware. Things that are like pottery. Do they need to be toiveled or not?
They do not need to be toiveled. Okay, they do not need to be toiveled. Some of them have a glaze on them, a glass very thin layer. According to most of, according to many Ashkenazi poskim, since the glass layer is so thin, we don't need to toivel it. That's also how Rabbi, a Sephardi rabbi, wrote. And if this coating has importance and is thick, so some say you should toivel it without a blessing. But just stone things do not need to be toiveled.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so let's continue to the next topic. And how do we toivel? Okay, how do we toivel? Doing that, I went to Baron Hirsch and we took a video there. It's booked about 3 minutes, so I'll share it here. It's also what's a mikveh, showing maybe the inside of the mikveh and also how do we toivel. Before we go to the video, let's learn the Shulchan Aruch, and we won't read it in. I'll just explain it. The Shulchan Aruch says you have to put all the vessels should be inside the water at once. Okay, which means there shouldn't be anything stopping water touching the vessel, and it needs to be dunked inside the water at once. So if it's a knife, all of it needs to be inside the water at once. You can't do half of the knife and then the other half of the knife. Another thing we should make sure is that the hand doesn't stop the water from coming and touching the vessel. There's 2 options of doing it. One of them is just holding untight. Okay, let your hand a bit go. And another option, which I do, and you let go of the whatever it is in the water just for a very split second and catch it again. That's fine. The same thing if you have those nets as they are in Baron Hirsch, and you put it inside the water, so the water moves it a bit and water touches everything at once. Okay, that's Shulchan Aruch. The main rule is that the water needs to touch all of the vessel at once. That's the main rule of Tevilat Kelim.
Rabbi Wende?
Yeah.
So what about, so the part where you have the hand, even if it's loose, is still a little bit there that didn't get maybe the water. So I've turned it over and let that part be in the water. Is that okay?
If no, as long as it's inside the water at the same time. If your hand, another option which is brought, if your hands are wet, and then let's just stop sharing the screen a second. Okay, if your hands are wet and then you take, let's say I'm toiveling this, and my hand is inside the mikveh, or just wet from the water of the mikveh, and I hold it, so there's water between my hand and the vessel. Okay, and this water connects to the mikveh, so that's fine. But also holding it loose also is fine. Okay, also holding it loose, the water comes inside when the hand is loose. And as I said, another very simple option which I use is I let go just for a split of a second, like this. Okay, really like this. It's enough. You can see. I don't think I've ever lost something in a mikveh. Just letting it go really for a second. But if you're scared, so just make sure your hands are wet beforehand from the water of the mikveh, and make sure you're holding it loose. Okay.
Okay.
Or when you put it inside those containers, the nets, that's also fine. Okay, because the water moves it. There is a clip which I don't have. I was looking for it, but I didn't have it. I used to be in the Navy. Before we came to Memphis, Memphis used to be a rabbi in the Navy. And then we had a very interesting way of toiveling dishes. We take those big containers, huge containers. I could go inside easily with the table I'm sitting near. They used to have holes inside them, fill them up with dishes. We used to have a crane taking it, dipping it inside the water. And then because of the waves, everything just moved there, and the water touched everything. And that was an easy way before Pesach, when we had hundreds or sometimes thousands of new dishes to toivel everything inside the sea. The only thing we had to make sure is afterwards to wash it really well. Otherwise, it would get rusty. That's quite a neat way to toivel dishes with a crane. If I managed to get the clip which someone took, not in my base, you weren't allowed to take videos in my base, from a different base. So I'll share it with you. That's just a neat thing. Okay, so let's. I took a 3-minute video of in Baron Hirsch of a bit about the mikveh and how they toivel. If it's too long, maybe we'll cut it in the middle. But let's share it. it's gathered in a bowl. Let's go in and see so that's where the rainwater.
I don't hear the audio. Is the audio on?
Yes, audio. Maybe there's a point of me sharing the audio. What I'll do is we'll skip this and I'll show I'll talk while we see it. Didn't realize the audio doesn't work. Next time you go to the mikveh kelim in Baron Hirsch, notice there's like a cupboard on the left side of the mikveh. It's like a window which you can open. If you open it, you'll see what we see here, and that's let's just make it silent a second. One moment. Okay. And the rainwater comes in from the screen pipe you saw. It's collected from the rain. The rainwater goes into this bowl tevilah. That's where we toivel the dishes. And this water is changed only by rainwater. Okay, there's no tap water coming into it. This water is changed only by rainwater. So that's how they make sure the mikveh is kosher. Hence, the water is changed only by rainwater. Okay, since the audio doesn't work, so we'll skip it now, and afterwards I can share the clip with you, so you can also hear the audio. Important thing which I mentioned there in the video, and that is mikveh has. Let's stop sharing the screen. We don't need to share it now. A mikveh has could be one out of two options, and I think there's quite a few questions rose around the coronavirus, and people were scared to go to the mikveh. And they ask if they can go to Wolf River or to one of the lakes here. So a mikveh can be all rainwater, which is gathered, okay, and is not moving, it's not running. That's one option for mikveh. Another option is spring water, and that's kosher even if it's running, like in a creek or river. So the mikveh we have here and all the other places is rainwater which is gathered. Okay, that's called the mikveh. Mikveh, that's the word mikveh in Hebrew means to gather. What about creeks? Or can we toivel in creeks? When we have a lot of rain, so we say that rainwater is kosher only when it's standing. And when we have a lot of rain and the creek is made mostly out of rainwater, so this water is pasul because the water needs to be standing. And a mikveh is or standing rainwater or can be running, but it must be from a spring. Okay, running rainwater aren't kosher, and therefore, whenever we are scared that there's more rain in the creek, so we don't toivel in the creek. I asked Rabbi Jacob if he knows what seasons we have more rain, less rain in the Gemara in Babel in Iraq. So the Gemara says that there's a difference between Nisan and Tishrei. When Nisan is right after the winter, so it's a problem. Tishrei, it's after the summer, it's kosher. Here in Memphis, we have rain through the whole year, so it's very hard to know when the water is in the river is from rainwater, when it's not from rainwater. Maybe in lakes, it's better because the lakes are standing. However, there's a mikveh, and the mikveh is kosher, and I checked it. I was there a few times. And when I learned about Tikvat, we went to Kashrut, and they change the water only by rainwater. So the mikveh there is kosher. And Baruch Hashem, with COVID, they're very strict. When I took the video, so when I was inside the rooms, I had to be with a mask on, even if it was just for a video. They're quite strict about COVID. So that's about that. And now we can move to, just one thing about the blessing. Okay, the blessing we say before toiveling the dishes. Okay, we say al Tevilat Kelim. And Kelim means a few vessels. If we have one, so we say al Tevilat Kli. If we have a few, two or more, we say al Tevilat Kelim. We say the bracha before toiveling the dishes, and it's enough to say the bracha once, and we have all the dishes in mind. And like all other cases, if we forgot to say the bracha, so we still did the mitzvah. Okay, we don't need to toivel again. As soon as we toivel the dishes, even if we forgot the blessing, so we don't need to repeat toiveling. Okay, now I can go to the next topic. Let's share again the screen. Any questions about the mikveh or how to toivel before we go to the next topic? No. Okay. Great. This is the main last topic we had. Is the food kosher? Okay. If I used a dish that wasn't toiveled, is the food kosher or no? Before we go into the answer of it, we should first know there's an argument in the poskim. Okay, according to some of the poskim, not all of them, according to some of them, you can use, actually I think I actually brought it here in the end. Okay, some of the Rishonim say there's a mitzvah to toivel the dishes as soon as possible, but until you toivel it, you can still use it. It's permitted to use it until it's toiveled. Okay, so that's only some of the Rishonim. So obviously, according to those poskim, the food is kosher. Okay, there's no problem. The food is kosher because they say you can use it until you toivel it. Just toivel it as soon as possible. However, most poskim say that you shouldn't use the dishes until they're toiveled. Okay, you shouldn't use the dishes until they're toiveled. And then we have a question, according to those poskim, happened if I used it? Okay, I went to a friend by accident, I bought something new and I used it by mistake. Is it kosher or no? And the Rama says, and there's no argument on that if someone took and used this vessel without tevilah, without toiveling it, so the food that he used, it's not forbidden, it's permitted, and he could eat it. He should still toivel, should still dunk the vessel afterwards, but the food itself is kosher. And this is an important halacha, mainly because sometimes things happen. We go to a friend, we are at our house, and we should know that the food is kosher even if it's not toiveled. Okay, so there's a mitzvah to toivel it, but we shouldn't use it until it is toiveled, but the food is still kosher. And that brings us to the last topic of this subject. What about a guest? Okay, what about a guest who goes to a friend, who goes to a hotel, and he doesn't know if the dishes there are toiveled or no? Okay, well, what does it? So some people ask just to eat them disposables. Okay, and they're using only disposable dishes. So that's some poskim, some people. There are some poskim which say, well, if it's a safek, okay, so don't ask. Okay, don't ask. And then the owner, he has the mitzvah to toivel the dishes, and you using it, so it's more of a rabbinical problem to use it. But just don't ask, and you have a question. If you don't ask, so it's fine. But sometimes it doesn't help not to ask. Sometimes we know that the dishes aren't toiveled. And sometimes we feel very uncomfortable to ask to use disposable dishes. It can be with family that they have, some of the family isn't religious, isn't observant. It could be someone who's observant and doesn't know about toiveling the dishes. And sometimes we are trying to ask, and we don't want to cause anger and fights between people. And the rabbis realized that sometimes we need to be sensitive about it. So the later rabbis seem to look for those opinions that say that even as a guest, you can use the dishes without toiveling them. One of them, I think, is Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and he permitted it as a one-time use. If you use it for once, so it's fine. And it's not because if you use it for once, so it's fine. And he based himself on those opinions that say, well, as we mentioned, from the Torah, you should just toivel as soon as possible. And the Chachamim also told you, just toivel as soon as possible. But until you toivel, you can use it. Okay, so that's the and maybe increasing, expanding. This opinion says, as you as a guest, and you're using it as one time, and given the fact that it's sometimes uncomfortable and you don't want to fight, so you can rely on these opinions. Another people said, well, as a guest, so I have the food served to me, and I'm not using the dish. I'm just clearing it up. That's an interesting way of looking at it. So I take food from the plate. I'm just taking the food off the plate. If I'm the owner and I put the food on the plate, I cook with the pots. That's using it. Me as a guest, it's just taking it off the plate, so it's not using it. You can see it's trying maybe to stretch the opinion that it's fine to do it, maybe because of realizing that really food connects between people. The best is if it's relative. For example, my grandparents, my parents became chozrim b'tshuva. They became from. My grandparents aren't religious, but there was a lot of love in the family and respect. And we bought new dishes and toiveled them, and that was everything fine. And they accepted it and everything, and they kept it for us in the house, and we could eat there without any problem. That's great. That's obviously the best thing. If we can ask to use disposables and there won't be any anger, so that's also fine. But if not, so it seems like we can rely on those opinions, that we can use it at least for once without toiling it, especially if we're talking about glass plates or coral plates or other things, which the mitzvah to toivel them isn't from the Torah, it's a rabbinical mitzvah. So especially in those things, we can rely on it. The last maybe topic goes in this is, what about a restaurant? Does someone in a restaurant doesn't need to toivel it? So the owner of the restaurant seems like he should toivel his dishes. If the restaurant is owned by a non-Jewish person, so obviously he doesn't need to toivel the dishes. It doesn't help if he toivel the dishes if it's owned by a non-Jewish person. But as a customer, so there's more place to say in a restaurant that we can use the dishes even without toiveling it. To explain it, we need to go into another term which we didn't mention beforehand. So I'll just mention it, and we won't explain it just so we don't have the knowledge. There's a difference between clay seuda, vessels for a meal, and clay mekach or memkar, vessels which are made for profit, to make money. We aren't going to go into it, but the restaurant might belong to the second option, second category. It's not something of a meal. The owner has it to make profit from it. Actually, once I went to a restaurant in Israel where we have restaurants, and there was this nice small frying pan made out of something, and the person next to me asked the person from the restaurant, can we buy it? And I'll sure the restaurant will say, no, it belongs to the restaurant. And I said, yes, you can buy it. Okay, we also sell them, but then I was shocked to see such a thing, and we never saw such a thing. But in a restaurant, there's a bit more place to be makel, to be lenient, especially as a customer. The owner of the restaurant, he should toivel it, and but the customer can eat there. Obviously, it is a kashrut thing. So that summarizes this. If there's any questions, so welcome. If not, so I'm reminding us this is the last class we have. Next week, the Bachurim will be starting the laws of Afashat Chala.